You're tuned in to CICK 93.9 FM Smithers Community Radio. This is River Reads, with host and narrator River Wild. A story hour, where those of all ages can escape into bedtime stories and fairy tales, new and old, but mostly old and at times macabre, or silly, or even perhaps a little confusing, as written in Old English, and the host sometimes fumbles the odd word, and then there's those stories whose premise or message has aged poorly. But let's face it, you can't be picky when you're dependent upon copyright-free material available through Creative Commons. So, if you enjoy a narrated story and don't mind a weird tale, let's begin.
River Reads has been recognized as the recipient of a national award, the Broadcast Dialogue's Canadian Radio Awards, winning Best Podcast in the Small Market category.
River Reads is not a kids' show, but is not a kids' show. Listener's discretion is advised.
This week on River Reads, episode 47, Your Own Worst Enemy, features two longer tales from the collection The Blue Fairy Book, edited by Andrew Lang, called Prince Darling and the 40 Thieves.
Gender Blender.
Remember to tune in weekly for our Gender Blender segment, where we flip and play with traditional gender roles, reimagining classic fairy tales, only revealing which tale is our Gender Blender tale at the end of each episode. And now for Ramble. Hello, I'm your host, narrator River Wild, recording live from under my stairs, aka not really live. I just record that way to cut down on my editings. Today's tale, Prince Darling and the 40 Thieves, in Lang's Blue Fairy Book, highlight morality, the consequence of actions, and virtue's victory. Prince Darling teaches the true nobility comes from kindness, selfishness, and redemption through suffering, not birth or vanity. The 40 Thieves warns that greed leads to ruins, and intelligence, loyalty, and quick thinking are more valuable than strength or magic. Both tales highlight that despite challenges, integrity, honesty, kindness ultimately lead to positive outcomes. And with that, let's begin.
The following story has been rated AHD, as an animal is harmed and or may die. And while often benign in description, listener discretion is advised.
Prince Darling, from The Blue Fairy Book, edited by Andrew Lang. Once upon a time, there lived a king who was so happy and kind that his subjects called him the Good King. It happened one day, when he was out hunting, that a little white rabbit, which his dogs were chasing, sprang into his arms for shelter. The king stroked it gently and said to it, "Well, Bunny, as you have come to me for protection, I will see that nobody hurts you." And he took it home to his palace and had it put in a pretty little house with all sorts of nice things to eat. That night, when he was alone in his room, a beautiful lady suddenly appeared before him. Her long dress was as white as snow, and she had a crown of white roses upon her head. The good king was very much surprised to see her, for he knew his door had been tightly shut, and he could not think how she had got in. But she said to him, "I am the fairy Truth. I was passing through the wood when you were out hunting, and I wished to find out if you were really good, as everyone said you were. So I took the shape of a little rabbit and came to your arms for shelter. For I know that those who are merciful to animals will be still kinder to their fellow man. If you had refused to help me, I should have been certain that you were wicked. I thank you for your kindness you have shown me, which has made me your friend forever. You have only to ask me for anything you want, and I promise that I will give it to you." "Madame," said the good king, "since you are a fairy, you no doubt know all my wishes. I have but one son, whom I love very dearly. That is why he is called Prince Darling. If you are really good enough to wish to do me a favor. I beg that you will become his friend." "With all my heart," answered the fairy. "I can make your son the handsomest prince in the world, or the richest, or the most powerful. Choose whichever you like for him." "I do not ask any of these things for my son," replied the good king. "But if you will make him the best of princes, I shall indeed be grateful to you. What good would it do him to be rich or handsome, or to possess all the kingdoms of the world if he were wicked? You know well he would still be unhappy. Only a good man can be really contented." "You are quite right," answered the fairy. "But it is not in my power to make Prince Darling a good man unless he will help me. He must himself try hard to become good. I can only promise to give him good advice, to scold him for his faults, and to punish him if he will not correct and punish himself." The good king was quite satisfied with this promise, and very soon afterwards he died. Prince Darling was very sorry, for he loved his father with all his heart, and he would willingly have given all his kingdom and all his treasure of gold and silver if they could have kept the good king with him. 2 days afterwards, when the prince had gone to bed, the fairy suddenly appeared to him and said, "I promised your father I would be your friend, and to keep my word I have come to bring you a present." At the same time, she put a little gold ring onto his finger. "Take great care of this ring," she said. "It is more precious than diamonds. Every time you do a bad deed, it will prick your finger. But if, in spite of its pricking, you go on in your evil way, you will lose my friendship, and I shall become your enemy." So saying, the fairy disappeared, leaving Prince Darling very much astonished. For some time he behaved so well that the ring never pricked him, and that made him so contented that his subjects called him Prince Darling the Happy. One day, however, he went out hunting, but could get no sport, which put him in a very bad temper. It seemed to him, as he rode along, that his ring was pressing into his finger, but it did not prick him. He did not heed it. When he got home and went to his own room, his little dog, Bibby, ran to meet him, jumping round him with pleasure. "Get away," said the prince quite gruffly. "I don't want you. You're in my way." The poor little dog, who didn't understand this at all, pulled at his coat to make him at least look at her, and this made Prince Darling so cross that he gave her quite a hard kick. Instantly his ring pricked him sharply, as if it had been a pin. It was very much surprised, and sat down in a corner of his room, feeling quite ashamed of himself. "I believe the fairy's laughing at me," he thought. "Surely I can have done no great wrong in just kicking a tiresome animal. What is the good of me being ruler of the kingdom if I am not even allowed to beat my own dog?" "I am not making fun of you," said a voice answering Prince Darling's thoughts. "You have committed 3 faults. First of all, you were out of temper because you could not have what you wanted, and you thought all men and animals were only made to do your pleasure. Then you were really angry, which is very naughty indeed. And lastly, you were cruel to the poor little animal who did not in the least deserve to be ill-treated. I know you are far above a little dog, but if it were right and allowed that great people should ill-treat all who beneath them, I might at this moment beat you and kill you, for a fairy is greater than a man. The advantage of possessing a greater empire is not to be able to do the evil that one desires, but to do all the good that one possibly can." The prince saw how naughty he had been, and promised to try and do better in the future. But he did not keep his word. The fact was that he had been brought up by a foolish nurse who had spoiled him when he was little. If he wanted anything, he only had to cry and fret and stamp his feet, and she would give him whatever he asked for, which had made him self-willed, Also, she had told him from morning to night that he would one day be king, and the kings were very happy, because everyone was bound to obey and respect them, and no one could prevent them from doing just as they liked. When the prince grew old enough to understand, he soon learned that there could be nothing worse than to be proud, obstinate, and conceited, and had really tried to cure himself of these defects, but by the time his faults had become habits, and a bad habit is very hard to get rid of. Not that he was naturally of a bad disposition. He was truly sorry when he had been naughty, and said, "I am very unhappy to have struggled against my anger and pride every day. If I have been punished for them when I was little, they would not be trouble to me now." His ring pricked him very often, and sometimes he left off what he was doing at once, but at other times he would not attend to it. Strangely enough, it gave him only a slight prick for a trifling fault, but when he was really naughty it made his finger actually bleed. At last he got tired of being constantly reminded, and wanted to be able to do as he liked. So he threw his ring aside, and thought himself the happiest man to have got rid of its teasing pricks. He gave himself up to doing every foolish thing that occurred to him, until he became quite wicked, and nobody could like him any longer. One day, when the prince was walking about, he saw a young girl, who was very pretty, that he made up his mind at once that he would marry her. Her name was Celia, and she was as good as she was beautiful. Prince Darling fancied that Celia would think herself only too happy if he offered to make her a great queen. But she said fearlessly, "Sire, I have only a shepherdess and a poor girl, but nevertheless I will not marry you." "Do you dislike me?" asked the prince, who was very much vexed at this answer. "No, my prince," replied Celia. "I cannot help thinking you very handsome, but what good would riches be to me, and all the grand dresses and splendid carriages that you would give me, if the bad deeds which I should see you do every day made me hate and despise you?" The prince was very angry at this speech, and commanded his officers to make Celia a prisoner and carry her off to his palace. All day long the remembrance of what she had said annoyed him, but as he loved her, he could not make up his mind to have her punished. One of the prince's favourite companions was his foster brother, whom he trusted entirely, but he was not at all a good man, and gave Prince Darling very bad advice, and encouraged him in all his evil ways. When he saw the prince so downcast, he asked what was the matter, and when he explained that he could not bear Cecilia's bad opinion of him, and was resolved to be a better man in order to please her, this evil adviser said to him, "You are very kind, you're troubled yourself about this little girl. If I were you, I would no sooner make her obey me. Remember that you are king, and that it would be laughable to see you trying to please a shepherdess, who ought to be only too glad to be one of your slaves. Keep her in prison, and feed her on bread and water for a little while, and then, if she still says that she will not marry you, have her head cut off, to teach her other people that you mean to be obeyed. Why, if you cannot make a girl like that do as you wish, your subject will soon forget that they are only put into the world for our pleasure." "But," said Prince Darling, "would it not be a shame if I had an innocent girl put to death? For Cecilia really has done nothing to deserve punishment." "If people do not do as you tell them, they ought to suffer for it," answered his foster brother. "But even if it were unjust, and you had better be accused of that by your subjects, then they should find out that they may insult and thwart you as often as they please." In saying this, he was touching a weak point in his brother's character, for the prince's fear of losing any of his power made him at once abandon his first idea of trying to be good, and resolve to try and frighten the shepherdess into consenting to marry him. His foster brother, who wanted him to keep this resolution, invited 3 young courtiers, as wicked as himself, to sup with the prince, and they persuaded him to drink a great deal of wine, and continued to excite his anger against Cecilia by telling him that she had laughed at his love for her, until at last, in quite a furious rage, he rushed off to find her, declaring that if she still refused to marry him, she should be sold as slaves the very next day. But when he reached the room in which Cecilia had been locked up, he was greatly surprised to find that she was not in it, though he had the key in his own pocket at the time. His anger was terrible, and he vowed vengeance against whoever had helped her to escape. His bad friends, when they heard him, resolved to turn his wrath upon an old nobleman whom had formerly been his tutor, and who still dared sometimes to tell Prince of his faults, for he loved him as if he had been his own son. At first Prince Darling had thanked him, but after time he grew impatient and thought it must just be a mere love of fault-finding that made his old tutor blame him when everyone else was praising and flattering him. So he ordered him to retire from his court, though he still from time to time spoke of him as a worthy man whom he had respected, even if he no longer loved him. His unworthy friends feared that he might some day take it into his head to recall his old tutor, so they thought they now had a good opportunity of getting him banished forever. They reported to the prince. The Suleiman, for that was the tutor's name, had boasted of having helped Cecilia to escape. They bribed 3 men to say the Suleiman himself had told them about it. The prince, in great anger, set his foster brother with a number of soldiers to bring his tutor before him in chains like a criminal. After giving this order, he went to his own room. But he had scarcely got into it when there were 3 of a clap of thunder which made the ground shake, and the fairy Truth appeared suddenly before him. "I promised your father," she said sternly, "to give you good advice and to punish you if you refuse to follow it. You have despised my counsel. You have gone your own evil way until you are only outwardly a man. Really, you are a monster, the horror of everyone who knows you. It is time that I should fulfill my promise and begin your punishment. I condemn you to resemble the animals whose ways you have imitated. You have made yourself like the lion by your anger, and like the wolf by your greediness. Like a snake, you have ungratefully turned upon one who was a second father to you. Your truliness has made you like a bull. Therefore, in your new form, take the appearance of all these animals." The fairy had scarcely finished speaking when Prince Darling saw to his horror that her words were fulfilled. He had a lion's head, a bull's horns, a wolf's feet, and a snake's body. At the same instant he found himself in a great forest, beside a clear lake, in which he could see plainly the horrible creature he had become, and a voice said to him, "Look carefully at the state to which your wickedness has brought you. Believe me, your soul is 1,000 times more hideous than your body." Prince Darling recognized the voice of the fairy Truth, and turned in a fury to catch her and eat her up if he possibly could. But he saw no one, and the same voice went on, "I laugh at your powerlessness and anger. I intend to punish your pride by letting you fall into the hands of your own subjects." The prince began to think that the best thing he could do would be to get as far away from the lake as he could. Then at least he would not be continually reminded of his terrible ugliness. So he ran towards the wood. But before he had gone many yards, he fell into a deep pit which had been made to trap bears, and the hunters, who were hiding in a tree, leaped down and secured him with several chains, and led him into the chief city of his own kingdom. On the way, instead of recognizing that his own faults had brought this punishment upon him, he accused the fairy of being the cause of all his misfortune, and bit and tore at his chains furiously. As they approached the town, he saw that some great rejoicing was being held, and when the hunters asked what had happened, they were told that the prince, whose only pleasure it was to torment his people, had been found in his room, killed by a thunderbolt, for that was supposed to have become of him. 4 of his courtiers, who had encouraged him in his wicked doings, had tried to seize the kingdom and divide it between them, but the people, who knew it was their bad counsel which had so changed the prince, had cut off their heads, and had offered the crown to Solomon, whom the prince had left in prison. This noble lord had just been crowned, and the deliverance of the kingdom was the cause of the rejoicing. For, they said, he is a good and just man, and we shall once more enjoy peace and prosperity. Prince Darling roared with anger when he had heard this, but it was still worse for him when he reached the great square before his own palace. He saw Solomon, seated upon a magnificent throne, and all the people crowded round, wishing him a long life, that he might undo all the mischief done by his predecessors. Presently, Solomon made a sign with his hand that the people should be silent, and said, "I've accepted the crown you have offered me, but only that I may keep it for Prince Darling, who is not dead as you suppose. The fairy has assured me that there is still hope that you may some day see him again, good and virtuous, as he was when he first came to the throne. Alas," he continued, "he was led away by philters. I knew his heart, and I am certain that if it had not been for the bad influence of those who surrounded him, he would have been a good king and a father to his people. We may hate his faults, but let us pity him and hope for his restoration. As for me, I would die gladly if that would bring back our prince to reign justly and worthily once more." These words went to Prince Darling's heart. He realized the true affection and faithfulness of his old tutor, and for the first time reproached himself for all his evil deeds. At the same instant, he felt all his anger melting away, and he began quietly to think over his past life, and to admit that his punishment was not more than he deserved. He left off tearing at the iron bars of the cage in which he was shut up, and became as gentle as a lamb. The hunters who had caught him took him to Great Manjeri, where he was chained up among all the other wild beasts, and determined to show his sorrow for his past bad behavior by being gentle and obedient to the man who had to take care of him. Unfortunately, this man was very rough and unkind, and though the poor monster was quite quiet, he often beat him without rhyme or reason when he happened to be in a bad temper. One day, when this keeper was asleep, a tiger broke its chain and flew at him to eat him. But Prince Darling, who saw what was going on, at first felt quite pleased to think that he should be delivered from his persecutor, but soon he thought better of it and wished that he were free. "I would return good for evil," he said to himself, "and save the unhappy man's life." He had hardly wished this when his iron cage flew open, and he rushed to the side of the keeper, who was awake and was defending himself against the tiger. When he saw the monsters had got out, he gave himself up for lost, but his fear was soon changed into joy, for the kind monster threw itself upon the tiger and very soon killed it, and then came and crouched at the feet of the man it had saved. Overcome with gratitude, the keeper stooped to caress the strange creature which had done him such a great service, but suddenly a voice said in his ear, "A good action should never go unanswered." And at the same instant the monster disappeared, and he saw at his feet only a little dog. Prince Darling, delighted by the change, frisked about the keeper, showing his joy in every way he could, and the man, taking it up in his arms, carried him to the king, to whom he told the whole story. The queen said that she liked to have this wonderful little dog, and the prince would have been very happy in his new home if he could have forgotten that he was a man and a king. The queen petted and took care of him, but she was so afraid that he would get too fat that she consulted the court physician, who said that he was to be fed only upon bread, and that not to have much even of that. So poor Prince Darling was terribly hungry all day long, but he was very patient about it. One day, when they gave him his little loaf for breakfast, he thought he would like to eat it out in the garden, so he took it up in his mouth and trotted away towards a brook that he knew of a long way from the palace. But he was surprised to find that the brook was gone, and where had been stood a great house that seemed to be built of gold and precious stones. A number of people, splendidly dressed, were going into it, and sounds of music and dancing and feasting could be heard from the windows. But what seemed very strange was that these people who had come out of the house were pale and thin, and their clothes were torn and hanging in rags about them. Some fell down dead as they came out before they had time to get away. Others crawled further with great difficulty, while others again lay on the ground, fainting with hunger, and begged a morsel of bread from those who were going into the house, but they would not so much as look at the poor creatures. Prince Darling went up to the young girl who was trying to eat a few blades of grass. She was so hungry. Touched with compassion, he said to himself, "I am very hungry, but I shall not die of starvation before I get my dinner. If I give my breakfast to this poor creature, perhaps I may save her life." So he laid his piece of bread in the girl's hand and saw her eat it up eagerly. She soon seemed to be quite well again, and the prince, delighted at having been able to help her, was thinking of going home to the palace, when he heard a great outcry, and turning round saw Cecilia, who was being carried against her will into the great house. For the first time, the prince regretted that he was no longer the monster. Then he would have been able to rescue Celia. Now he could only bark feebly at the people who were carrying her off, and to try to follow them, but they chased and kicked him away. He determined not to quit the place till he knew what had become of Celia, and blamed himself for what had befallen her. "Alas," he said to himself, "I am furious with the people who are carrying Cecilia off, but isn't that exactly what I did myself? And if I had not been prevented, did I not intend to be still more cruel to her?" Here he was interrupted by a noise above his head. Someone was opening a window, and he saw with delight that it was Cecilia herself, who came forward and threw out a plate of the most delicious-looking food. Then the window was shut again, and Prince Darling, who had not had anything to eat all day, thought he might as well take the opportunity of getting something. He ran forward to begin, but the young girl to whom he had given his bread gave a cry of terror and took him up in her arms, saying, "Don't touch it, poor little dog. That house is the palace of pleasure, and everything that comes out of it is poisoned." At that same moment a voice said, "Our good action always brings its reward." And the prince found himself changed into a beautiful white dove. He remembered that white was the favourite colour of the Fairy of Truth, and began to hope that he might at last win back her favour. But just now his first care was for Celia, and rising into the air he flew round and round the house until he saw an open window. But he searched through every room in the vain. No trace of Cecilia was to be seen, and the prince, in despair, determined to search through the world till he found her. He flew on and on for several days, till he came to a great desert, where he saw a caravan, and to his delight there sat Cecilia, sharing the simple breakfast of an old hermit. Overjoyed to have found her, Prince Darling perched upon her shoulder, trying to express his caresses about how glad he was to see her again. And Cecilia, surprised and delighted by the tameness of this pretty white dove, stroked it softly and said, though she never thought of its understanding her. I accept the gift that you make me of yourself, and I will love you always. Take care what you are saying, Celia, said the old hermit. Are you prepared to keep that promise? Indeed, I do hope so, my sweet shepherdess, cried the prince, who was at that moment restored to his natural shape. You promised to love me always. Tell me that you really mean what you say, or I shall have to ask the fairy to give me back the form of the dove which pleased you so much. You need not be afraid that she will change her mind, said the fairy, throwing off the hermit's robe in which she had been disguised and appearing before them. Celia has loved you ever since she first saw you, only she would not tell you while you were so obstinate and naughty. Now you have repented and mean to be good. You deserve to be happy, and so she may love you as much as she likes. Celia and Prince Darling threw themselves at the fairy's feet, and the prince was never tired of thanking her for her kindness. Celia was delighted to hear how sorry he was for all his past follies and misdeeds, and promised to love him as long as she lived. Rise, my children, said the fairy, and I will transport you to the palace, and Prince Darling shall have back again the crown he fortified by his bad behavior. While she was speaking, they found themselves in Solomon's hall, and his delight was great at seeing his dear master once more. He gave up the throne joyfully to the prince, and remained always the most faithful of his subjects. Celia and Prince Darling reigned for many years, but he was so determined to govern worthily that to do his duty that his ring, which he took to wearing again, never once pricked him severely.
This is CICK 93.9 FM Smithers Community Radio, and you're listening to the national award-winning show, River Reads, hosted by narrator, River Wild. As a non-profit community radio station, we rely on our silver sponsors, like Mountain Eagle Books. Thank you, Mountain Eagle Books, for your invaluable support towards promoting local music and community radio. Now, let's continue with our scheduled programming.
The following is rated GGD, meaning it contains gross gore and/or death. Sensitive viewers may want to tune back in.
40 Thieves, from The Blue Fairy Book, edited by Andrew Lang. In a town in Persia, there dwelled two siblings, one named Qasim and the other Ali Baba. Qasim was married, rich, and lived in plenty, while Ali Baba had to maintain family by cutting wood in a neighboring forest and selling it to the town. One day, when Ali Baba was in the forest, they saw a troop of humans on horsebacks coming towards them in a cloud of dust. They were afraid they were robbers and climbed into a tree for safety. When they came up to them and dismounted, Ali Baba counted 40 of them. They unbridled their horses and tied them to trees. The finest among them, whom Ali Baba took to be their captain, went a little way among some bushes and said, "Open, sesame," so plainly that Ali Baba heard. A door opened in the rocks, and having made the troop go in, followed them, and the door shut again of itself. They stayed some time inside, and Ali Baba, fearing they might come out and catch them, was forced to sit patiently in the tree. At last the door opened again, and the 40 thieves came out. As the captain went in last, they came out first, and made them all pass them. They closed the door, saying, "Shut, sesame." Everyone bridled their horses and mounted. The captain put themselves at their head, and they returned as they came. Then Ali Baba climbed down and went to the door concealed among the bushes and said, "Open, sesame," and it flew open. Ali Baba, who expected a dull, dismal place, was greatly surprised to find it large and well lighted, and hollowed by the hand of man in the form of a vault, which received the light from an opening in the ceiling. They saw rich bales of merchandise, silk, stuff, brocades, all piled together, and gold and silver in heaps, and money in leather purses. They went in, and the door shut behind them. They did not look at the silver, but brought out as many bags of gold as they thought their asses, which were browsing outside, could carry, loaded them with the bags, and hid it all with faggots, using the words, "Shut sesame," closed the door, and went home. Then drove the asses into the yard, shut the gates, carried the money bags to their love, and emptied them out before them. They bade them to keep the secret, and told that they would go and bury the gold. "Let me first measure it," said their love. "I will go borrow a measure of someone while you dig the hole." So they ran to their partner of Kassem and borrowed a measure. Knowing Ali Baba's poverty, Kassem partner was curious to find out what sort of grain they wished to measure, and artfully put some suet at the bottom of the measurer. Ali Baba's love went home and set the measure on the heap of gold, and filled it and emptied it often, to their great content. They then carried it back to Kassem's partner, without noticing that a piece of gold was sticking to it, which Kassem's partner perceived directly, though back was turned. They grew very curious, and said to Kassem when they came home, "Kassem, your sibling is richer than you. They do not count their money, they measure it." Kassem begged them to explain this riddle, which they did by showing them the piece of money and telling them where they found it. Then Kassem grew so envious that they could not sleep, and went to their sibling in the morning before sunrise. "Ali Baba," they said, showing them the gold piece, "you pretend to be poor, and yet you measure gold?" By this Ali Baba perceived that their love, folly, Kassem partner had knew their whole secret, so confessed all, and offered Kassem a share. "That I expect," said Kassem, "but I must know where to find the treasure. Otherwise I will discover all, and you will lose all." Ali Baba, more out of kindness than fear, told them of the cave, and the very words to use. Kassem left Ali Baba, meaning to be beforehand with them and get the treasure for themselves. They rose early next morning, and set out with 10 mules loaded with great chests. They soon found the place, and the door in the rock, and they said, "Open sesame." The door opened and shut behind them. They could have feasted their eyes all day on the treasure, but now hastened to gather together as much of it as possible. But when they were ready to go, they could not remember what to say for thinking their great riches. Instead of sesame, they said, "Open barley," and the door remained fast. They named several different sorts of grain, all but the right one, and the door still stuck fast. They were so frightened at the danger they were in that they had as much forgotten the word as they had never heard it. About noon, the robbers returned to their cave, and saw Kassem's mule roving about with great chests on their backs. This gave them alarm. They drew their sabres and went to the door, which opened on their captain, saying, "Open sesame." Kassem, who had heard the trampling of their horses' feet, resolved to sell their life dearly. So when the door opened, they leapt out and threw the captain down. In vain, however, for the robbers with their sabres soon killed them. On entering the cave, they saw all the bags laid ready, and could not imagine how any one had got in without knowing their secret. They cut Kassem's body into 4 quarters, and nailed them up inside the cave, in order to frighten anyone who should venture in, and went away in search of more treasure. As night drew on, Kasim's partner grew very uneasy and ran to their in-laws and told them that Kasim had gone. Ali Baba did their best to comfort them and set out to the forest in search of Kasim. The first thing they saw on entering the cave was their dead sibling. Full of horror, they put the body on one of their asses and bags of gold on the other two, and covering all with some faggots, returned home. They drove the 2 asses laden with gold into their own yard, and led the other to Kasim's house. The door was opened by the slave Morgiana, whom Ali Baba knew to be both brave and cunning. Unloading the ass, they said to her, "This is the body of your master, whom has been murdered, but whom we must bury as though they had died in their own bed. I will speak with you again, but now tell your master I come." The partner of Kasim, on learning, offered to take them to live with them, and they would promise to keep this counsel and leave everything to Morgiana, whereupon they agreed and dried their eyes. Morgiana, meanwhile, sought an apothecary and asked them for some lozenges. "My poor master," they said, "can neither speak, and no one knows whether their distemper is." She carried home the lozenges and returned next day weeping, and asked for an essence only given to those just about to die. Thus, in the evening, no one was surprised to hear the wretched shrieks and cries of Kasim's partner, and Morgiana telling everyone that Kasim was dead. The day after, Morgiana went to an old cobbler near the gates of town, who opened their stall early, put a piece of gold in their hand, and bade them to follow, with their needle and thread. Having bound their eyes with a handkerchief, she took them to the room where the body lay, pulled off the bandage, and bade them to sew the quarters together, after which she covered their eyes again and led them home. Then they buried Kasim, and Morgiana and the slave followed to the grave, weeping and tearing her hair, while Kasim's partner stayed at home, uttering lamentant cries. Next day they went to live with Ali Baba, who gave Kasim's shop to the eldest heir. The 40 thieves, on their return to the cave, were much astonished to find Kasim's body gone, and some of their money bags. "We are certainly discovered," said the captain, "and shall be undone if we cannot find out who it is that knows our secret. 2 must have known it. We have killed one. We must find now the other. To this end, one of you is bold and artful, must go into the city, dressed as a traveller, and discover whom we've killed, and whether folks talk of the strange manner of their death. If the messenger fails, they must lose their life, lest we be betrayed." One of the thieves started up and offered to do this, and after the rest had highly commended them for their bravery, they disguised themselves and happened to enter the town at daybreak, just by Baba Mustapha's stall. The thief bade good day, saying, "Honest friend, how can you possibly see to stitch at your age?" "Old as I am," replied the cobbler, "I have very good eyes, and you will believe me when I tell you that I sewn a dead body together in a place where I have less light than I have now." The robber was overjoyed at this good fortune, and giving them a piece of gold, desired to be shown the house that the cobbler stitched up the dead body. At first Mustapha refused, then saying that they had been blindfolded, but when the robber gave another piece of gold, they began to think they might remember the turnings if blindfolded as before. This means succeeded. The robber partly led them, and was partly guided by them, right in front of Kasim's house, the door of which the robber marked with a piece of chalk. Then, well pleased, bade farewell to Baba Mustapha, and returned to the forest. By and by Morgiana, going out, saw the mark the robber had made, quickly guessed that some mischief was brewing, and fetching a piece of chalk, marked 2 or 3 doors on each side, without saying anything to anyone. The thief, meantime, told their comrades of their journey. The captain thanked them and bade them show them the house that had marked. But when they came to it, they saw that 5 or 6 of the houses were chalked in the same manner. The guide was so confounded that they knew not what answer to make, and when they returned, they at once beheaded for having failed. Another robber was dispatched, and having won over Baba Mustapha, marked the house in red chalk. But Morgiana, being again too clever for them, the second messenger was put to death also. The captain now resolved to go themselves, but wiser than the others, they did not mark the house, but looked at it so closely that they could not fail to remember it. They returned and ordered their thieves to go into the neighboring villages and buy 19 mules and 38 leather jars, all empty, except one which was full of oil. The captain put one of the thieves, fully armed, into each, rubbing the outside of the jars with oil from the full vessel. Then the 19 mules were loaded with 37 robbers in jars, and the jar of oil, and reached the town by dusk. The captain stopped the mule in front of Ali Baba's house, and said to Ali Baba, who was sitting outside for coolness, "I've brought some oil from a distance to sell at tomorrow's market, but it is now so late that I know not where to pass the night, unless you will do me the favour to take me in." Though Ali Baba had seen the captain of the robbers in the forest, they did not recognize them in the disguise of the oil merchant. They bade them welcome, opened the gates for the mules to enter, and went to Morgiana to bid her prepare a bed and supper for their guest. They brought the stranger into the hall, and after they had supped, went again to speak to Morgiana in the kitchen. The captain went into the yard under the pretence of seeing after the mules, but really to tell the thieves what to do. Beginning of the first jar and ending at the last, they said to each, "As soon as I throw some stones from the window of the chamber where I lie, cut the jars open with your knives and come out, and I will be with you in a trice." They returned to the house, and Morgiana led them to their chamber. They then told Abdullah, her fellow slave, to set on a pot to make some more broth for the master, who had gone to bed. Meanwhile her lamp went out, and she had no more oil in the house. "Do not be uneasy," said Abdullah. "Go into the yard and take some out of one of those jars." Morgiana thanked them for their advice, and took the oil pot and went into the yard. Where she came to the first jar, the robber inside said, "Is it time?" Any other slave but Morgiana, on finding a human in the jar instead of the oil she wanted, would have screamed and made a noise. But she, knowing the danger her master was in, betold herself of a plan, and answered quickly, "Not yet, but presently." She went to all the jars, giving the same answer, till she came to the jar of oil. She now saw that her master, thinking to enter an oil merchant, had let 38 robbers into their house. She filled her oil pot, went back to the kitchen, and having lit her lamp, went again to the oil jar and filled a large kettle full of oil. When it boiled, she went and poured enough oil into each jar to stifle and kill the robber inside. When this brave deed was done, she went back to the kitchen, put out the fire and the lamp, and waited to see what would happen. In a quarter of an hour, the captain of the robbers awoke, got up, and opened the window. All seems quiet. They threw down some pebbles, which hit the jars. They listened, and as none of them seemed to stir, grew uneasy, and went down into the yard. On going to the first jar and saying, "Are you asleep?" they smelled the hot boiled oil, and knew at once that their plot to murder Ali Baba and household had been discovered. They found all the gang were dead, and missing the oil out of the last jar, became aware of the manner of their death. They then forced the lock of the door leading into a garden, and climbing over several walls, made their escape. Margina heard and saw all this, and rejoicing at her success, went to bed and fell asleep. At daybreak, Ali Baba arose, and seeing the oil jars there still, asked why the merchant had not gone with their mules. Margina bade them look in the first jar and see if there was any oil. Seeing the human, started back in terror. "Have no fear," said Margina. "They cannot harm you. They are dead." Ali Baba, when they had recovered somewhat from astonishment, asked what had become of the merchant. "Merchant," said she. "They were no more merchant than I am." And she told the whole story, assuring that it was a plot of the robbers of the forest, of whom only 3 were left, and that the white and red chalk marks had been something to do with it. Ali Baba at once gave Margina her freedom, saying they owed her their life. They then buried the bodies in Ali Baba's garden, while the mule were sold in the market by slaves. The captain returned alone to the lonely cave, which seemed frightful to them without their lost companions, and firmly resolved to avenge them by killing Ali Baba. They dressed themselves carefully and went into the town, where they took lodging in an inn. In the course of a great many journeys to the forest, they carried away many rich stuffs and much fine linen, and set up a shop outside that of Ali Baba's heir. They called themselves Cogia Hansen, and as they were both civil and well-dressed, they soon became friends with Ali Baba's heir, and through them with Ali Baba, whom they were continually asking to sup with. Ali Baba, wishing to return their kindness, invited them to their house and received them smiling, thanking them for their kindness to their child. When the merchant was about to take leave, Ali Baba stopped them, saying, "Where are you going in such a haste? Will you not stay and sup with me?" The merchant refused, saying that they had a reason, and on Ali Baba asking them what that was, replied, "It is that I cannot eat no victuals that have any salt in them." "If that is all," said Ali Baba, let me tell you, there shall be no salt in either the meat or the bread that we eat tonight." They went to give this order to Margina, who was much surprised. "Who is this," she said, "who eats no salt with meat?" "They are an honest person, Margina," returned her master. "Therefore do as I bid you." But she could not withstand a desire to see this strange person, so she helped Abdullah to carry up the dishes, and saw in a moment that Cogia Hansen was the robber captain, and carried a dagger under their garment. "I am not surprised," she said to herself, "that this wicked person who intends to kill my master will eat no salt. But I will hinder their plans." She sent up the supper by Abdullah, while she made ready for one of the boldest acts that could be thought of. When the dessert had been served, Cogia Hansen had left alone with Ali Baba and their heir, whom they thought to make drunk and to then murder them. Margina, meanwhile, put on a headdress like a dancing girl's, and clasped a girdle round her waist, from which hung a dagger with a silver hilt, and said to Abdullah, "Take the tabor, and let us go and divert our master and guest." Abdullah took the tabor and played before Margina until they came to the door, where Abdullah stopped playing, and Margina made a low curtsy. "Come in, Margina," said Ali Baba, "and let Cogia Hansen see what you can do." And turning to Cogia Hansen, said, "She's my slave and my housekeeper." Cogia Hansen was by no means pleased, for they feared that their chance of killing Ali Baba was gone for the present, but pretended great eagerness to see Margina, and Abdullah began to play and Margina to dance. After she had performed several dances, she drew her dagger and made passes with it, sometimes pointing it to her own breast, sometimes at her master's, as if it were part of the dance. Suddenly, out of breath, she snatched the tabor from Abdullah with her left hand, and holding the dagger in her right, held out the tabor to her master Ali Baba and their heir, and put a piece of gold into it. And Cogia Hansen, seeing that she was coming to him, pulled out their purse to make a present. But while they are putting their hands into Margina's, plunged the dagger into their heart. "Unhappy girl!" cried Ali Baba and their heir. "What have you done to ruin us?" "It was to preserve you, master, not to ruin you," answered Margina. "See here," opening the false merchant's garment and showing the dagger. "See what an enemy you have entertained. Remember, they would eat no salt with you. And what more would you have? Look at them, both the false oil merchant and the captain of the 40 Thieves." Ali Baba was so grateful for Margina for thus saving their life that they offered her the heir in marriage, who readily consented, and a few days after the wedding was celebrated with great splendor. At the end of the year, Ali Baba, hearing nothing of the 2 remaining robbers, judged they were dead, and sent out to the cave. The door opened on saying, "Open sesame." They went in, and saw that nobody had been there since the captain left it. They brought away as much gold as they could carry, and returned to town. They told their heir the secret of the cave, which the heir handed down in turn to their children, and grandchildren of Ali Baba were rich to the end of their lives. Gender Blender. This week's River Reads Gender Blender tale was The 40 Thieves.
As a non-profit, we rely on sponsors like Smithers Brewing Company. Thank you, Smithers Brewing Company, for supporting local community radio.
This is CICK 93.9 FM Smithers Community Radio. You have been listening to River Reads, with host River Wild. For more River Reads, tune in weekly every Saturday at 10 a.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. See you then.